Good evening once again, all of our friends out there in Radio Land, and welcome once again to the Leo and Larry Show. My co-host Larry is not with us right now, but of course he'll be back again later. And we're so pleased to have once again, and thank you all for always saying how much you love this show. You love the show because of the really great and amazing guests that we have on. And we have yet another one for you again this week. And I'm talking about the executive director of the Southeast Climate and Energy Network, Alex Easdale, joining us from, it's got to be hot down there in Florida, joining us all the way from Florida, Alex Easdale. Welcome to the Leo and Larry Show, Alex.
Oh, Reverend Woodbury, very happy to be here. And a big hug to you and your team, and to Larry as well. And yeah, I'm over here in sunny Florida, sunny and rainy Florida, but man, the one constant here is that it's 100 degrees and it's humid and very hot.
Wow, I know what you mean. It's hot here too, but I remember the first time I went to Florida in the summer, I was like, well, I think I'll stay in South Carolina, But that's the whole planet is heating up, and that's in large part why Southeast Climate and Energy Network, or as we call it, SEN, exists. And so why don't you tell folks about yourself, some of your background? How did you get involved with work around clean energy and climate change and environmental justice? And, tell us about yourself and then about the organization of which you are the executive director.
Absolutely. So I'll start briefly with SEN. So Southeast Climate and Energy Network is a network of 85 member organizations. These are organizations that some are very big, some are somewhere in between, and some are very small. And in terms of scope, some work nationally, internationally. You have your Sierra Club, NRDC, Environmental Defense Fund, for example. And then you have strong regional groups like Appalachian Voices and Taproot Earth. Southern Alliance for Clean Energy is a former member of SEN. And then you have, small alliances within certain regions. For example, the Miami Climate Alliance is a member of our network. And then you have very, smaller grassroots organizations that do amazing work at the community level, and some at the state level. People's Justice Council in Alabama, for example, GASP. Of course, your organization, Rev, New Alpha, CDC, and the Whitney M. Slater Foundation has also been a longtime SEN member, and many others. So again, our network is across 11 states in the Southeast. We have some members that are from different regions of the country. The condition is that they do some kind of work in the Southeast, and the work, encompasses climate change issues. This can be clean energy. This can be fighting, wood pellet production in the Southeast and destroying a forest. The destruction of forests, for example, with groups like Dogwood Alliance, which is also a member. But definitely around clean energy, our members work also on climate justice and environmental justice issues. We have very prominent environmental justice leaders, also from the faith community that are part of our network. You're a prime example of that, Reverend. So we're a wonderful network, and the vision, and it's a big vision, but we envision the Southeastern U.S. as the leading region for just, equitable, and inclusive solutions to the climate crisis. And again, we're bold about it. We're proud that we're in the South. The South has, obviously, what is the saying, Rev? As the South goes, the country goes, or the nation goes.
Mm-hmm.
So, the South is an amazing region full of potential and opportunity. And you and I have talked about this a lot. And SEN's mission is to confront the climate crisis by creating strategic alignment, growing capacity, and building power among our member organizations and their communities in the Southeast. So we do a lot of our work programmatically. We do work directly, but we do a lot of our work by supporting our member organizations who are on the ground, doing amazing work across the board. So that's a little bit on SEN. As far as my story, I'm an immigrant from Argentina. We my mom actually was born in the U.S. but grew up in Argentina, and I came here as a kid. I was almost 10 years old. My dad worked in the sugar industry. He migrated here in the 80s. I came over here with them and my sister and my mom, and eventually we had they had my brothers, two brothers that were born in actually Pahokee, Florida, which is sugar country by Lake Okeechobee. But I became an American citizen. I became an Argentinian American, if you will. Went to school here, went to college in Pensacola, Florida, did a master's degree in Miami, wound up working with the Argentine consulate while I was studying international relations. Eventually worked in free trade area negotiations, or the FTAA, which took me to Panama. Also lived in Mexico for some time, and eventually kind of landed in the nonprofit sector with a group called Hispanics in Philanthropy. And I learned a lot with that organization. I worked with them for about 5 years. And basically, I was the transnational programs manager. So they had a really cool initiative where they had funds, a very large pool of funds that they would leverage in different communities and do a matching program with local funders and then re-grant that money to local organizations. So this, again, it was Hispanics in Philanthropy. So the whole focus in the U.S. was to strengthen the philanthropic sector and the nonprofit sector for the Latino community. In Latin America, we had a little bit more leeway in terms of, and more freedom in terms of program design. So I did some initiatives, or we had some initiatives around early childhood education in Argentina. We did an economic development initiative with some major funding in 6 countries, including Dominican Republic, Mexico, Argentina, El Salvador to an extent. And, that taught me a lot. It taught me how to raise money. It taught me how to leverage funding. I actually had no idea that I was good at fundraising, because I thought I was negotiating because I would go to the table with funds. But, it turns out that, they called it fundraising. So I kind of got a knack for that. That led to a position with a National Council La Raza, with a project called Democracia USA, which was much more focused on civic engagement and issues that impact not only Latino communities, but so-called BIPOC communities, definitely Black communities and others, around health, around education, around paid medical family medical leave, for example, and so on. And it was also had a very strong civic engagement bent. So that was also a really cool experience. And I did that for a few years, and then transitioned as an associate director, number 2 person at a college campus with a university called Ana G. Mendes University, which is from Puerto Rico, and they have several programs here in the U.S. And it's a university geared primarily for adult students, most of which are immigrants from Latin America, but also from other parts. And I started teaching there, and to be honest with you, I still teach there, and was the number 2 guy at that campus for almost 4 years. And then I landed at Sen a few years after that, when I launched my own consulting firm, which we still have, but the consulting firm was focused around providing strategic planning services, leadership development, and fundraising services to different nonprofits, small businesses. And one of those clients actually was the U.S. Climate Action Network. And I got a 6-month contract in 2016 with U.S. CAN to help manage this SEND project. Again, the U.S. Climate Action Network has a membership, I believe, of nearly 200 organizations. They're national. And within that network, they had a network within a network, if you will, in the Southeast. And Rev, you were a very, very strong, prominent part of that. So you can tell that story better than I can. But, I came in as a consultant on a 6-month contract. And basically, thanks to you and thanks to many others, we were able to take that project, create a strategic plan, create a very strong steering committee comprised of very, very important leaders in the climate movement in the Southeast. And we launched SEN as an independent network and organization in 2019. And I was asked by you and others to stay on as executive director. We did. We started in 2019 with a grant that wasn't enough funding to cover my salary or much else for that first year. But we had faith and belief, and we put the work out there, and we started to raise a little bit of money, started to build a team. And now 5 years later, we're at 7 staff people. We're contracting other positions as well. We have multi-year funding, and again, we're not quite there where I'd like to be, but we're much further along, and I think we've have a pretty nice footprint in the Southeast with some of the work that we've done.
That sounds great, and you've had a plethora of experiences, which I'm sure serves you well in being executive director of a network that has so many member organizations. But and when we come, we always have people, as you know, who are new to the work that you and others do. So can it's Southeast Climate and Energy Network. Can you kind of tell people what's the tie, what's the connection between the need for clean energy and what's going on with our climate? For those who, when they hear, stuff like clean energy, how does that fit in with climate change? I know for us, we
Right.
understand it very well, but we have young people and others who, let's make this a teachable moment for them.
Yeah, and you can help me. But I think I'm so happy you asked this question because one thing that I've been very cognizant of is that we oftentimes get siloed talking to ourselves, right? In wonky language and what have you, and we're not really expanding our reach, if you will, to our neighbors, to other people, to more in the community. 74% of the population in this country is concerned about climate change. So 3/4 of the population, which tells me that this is not really a partisan issue, is it? People know something's up. The world is on fire, and it is primarily because of industrial agriculture, and it is primarily because of the burning of fossil fuels. To break that down, that's natural gas, that's oil, petroleum. These fossil fuels obviously have existed since the Industrial Revolution, and now on a planet that has over 8 billion people. So, the clean energy and transitioning to clean energy sources, including solar, including wind energy, among others. I do not include nuclear in that mix because nuclear is, in my opinion, not a clean energy. But clearly will alleviate the stress that we're causing the environment. These heat trapping gases, obviously are warming the planet, and the consequences are dire. We're on a path right now. And correct me if I'm wrong. We're heading towards 1.5 Celsius above pre-industrial levels of warming. That doesn't sound like a lot. That's a little less than what three Fahrenheit, 3 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yes.
But it is significant. And you feel it, for example, in South Florida. I like to go outside, right? I have a patio. I like to step outside. I have a nice garden, trees. Even in that context, you go outside at 9, 10 p.m., it's still hot, right? So that affects animal life, that affects plant life, that affects insects, and everything is off balance. It's funny because I mentioned Argentina. I was in Argentina a few weeks ago, actually. Took a trip there with my mom and visited family in numerous parts of the country. And what's interesting is that it's winter over there because it's the southern hemisphere, so it's the opposite as it is in the north. And it was a very mild winter, and I could hear family members and friends talk about this. Wow, it's a very mild winter again. And wow, these flowers are blooming early. And these birds that used to flock over here, migrate over here at this time in April, now coming in June. And
Wow.
They're noticing the subtle changes, but you tell them, it's like, yeah, it's climate change, and they're like, yeah, right, it is climate change. So they get it, they agree, but they see it almost as an issue where they're just an observer and they're not a part of it. So I think a big part of our role in the next major step for our movement, if you will, and for leaders in this movement, is to talk to people, and like you said in your question, really just have teachable moments and teach with empathy. It took me quite a bit of a learning curve to really understand what's going on, as I came in here 7 years ago as a consultant, and I'm still learning. There's still a lot that obviously I don't know. I'm not a scientist, right? So I think we need to learn and teach with empathy and patience, and we will get many, many more people, not only to agree with us, but more importantly, to take action.
Yes, and action is what your member organizations are about. And you mentioned, 74% of people now know that climate change is real, and every day, literally every day in this country, there's some kind of climate or weather related disaster or extreme events, straight line winds, torrential rains, tornadoes, hurricanes, wildfires. I mean, we had wildfires so bad that the smoke from the wildfires came all the way down to South Carolina, to Dillon, South Carolina. And I'm
Hmm.
sure that Maui, the fires that have devastated the island of Maui in Hawaii, that some of that smoke is going to wind up because weather patterns go from west to east, so some of it is going to come our way, and so what we're seeing is an increase in weather incidents, all over the places. So you mentioned about fossil fuels. So what are some of your member organizations doing in order to move not only the country, because the whole world doing it now, move people away from the country away from fossil fuels and towards more clean energy? What kind of campaigns or actions or organizing is taking place among your member organizations?
Right. The examples. So the one is the advocacy piece, the fighting, the campaign that fights something that's messed up, and another is the educational piece, and maybe the other is the lobbying and talking to your legislatures, whether it's at the federal level or at the state level or even locally. So fighting the MVP pipeline, for example, right? We've had some wins, including with another Senate member, the Southern Environmental Law Center, has been involved in several of those fights from the legal angle. So a legal organization basically working with grassroots organizations right on the ground, making sure that these pipelines aren't built, and they're trying to build them over tribal burial sites and so on. I mean, super disrespectful, or
Mhm.
opening up new federal lands to oil drilling and what have you, so fighting those things, right? And there's different avenues, right? There's the legal avenue. There's again the campaign and advocacy avenue, where you obviously want to have an impact and reach people, right, to support you and to understand. So I think there's different layers of this work that happen regionally, locally, at the state level, nationally, and let me just say internationally. I think there has to be, and there is solidarity among different organizations and movements from different countries. This is a global issue, so we have to understand that this is a global fight, and it's very complex. But very proud that many of our members do amazing work across all of those fronts. But I
Mhm.
think if there's one thing, and I'll say it again, where there's a lot of potential, is education, educating people and doing things in communities, right, that are solutions. And at one point in time, I'll talk about a few very small pilot projects that we're supporting in some of our states in the Southeast this year, that hopefully some of them can become scalable or replicable even in different communities throughout the South.
Yes, great. And we were in Bonn, Germany together, and for the preceding event before, the United Nations Forum on Climate Change conference called COP, which will be the 28th year that countries around the world convene. And I don't think a lot of people know, because the media really doesn't let people know that there's a global movement to get away from fossil fuel cars and do electric vehicles. There's a global movement to do more solar. but there's also some solutions that people aren't happy with. So, is there a position or what how does SEND look at things like carbon capture and sequestration? And for our audience, one of the things that is contributing to climate change is the huge amounts of carbon that we're putting in our atmosphere. And so people who manufacture things and create electricity by burning carbon, some of them are saying, well, we're going to capture the carbon and we're going to put them in pipes. We're going to put them in big tanks and we'll bury them in the ground or we'll put them in salt water in abandoned coal mine. Does SEN take a position on some of these solutions or what some people call greenwashing solutions? Does SEN take positions on things like that, or is that something you leave up to individual member organizations?
Yeah, that's a great and actually very important question. So we're a network, and we're not a coalition. So a coalition, just to clarify or distinguish for folks who may not understand the difference because it's nuanced. A coalition tends to be more narrow in scope. It can be single issue, it could be just a few issues, and everyone in the coalition is in agreement, right? So, for example, if it was a coalition around carbon capture or against carbon capture, then everybody in that coalition will be in agreement. In a network, you have diversity of opinion or positions when it comes to certain things like that. Biomass would be another example. I will say that within the SEN network, I would say the majority, very strong majority of SEN members would be against carbon capture technology. It's They would argue it's very expensive. They would argue it's unnecessary. The best carbon capture technology out there that I've heard of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they're trees, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
the catchphrase now is nature-based solutions. Yeah, call it whatever you want. Let's plant more trees and let's stop cutting them down in the southeast, at a faster rate than that's happening in the Amazon. Okay, so but again, I cannot, as the executive director of this network, I cannot speak for 85 individual organizations and their missions and where they stand on specific positions. We
Mm-hmm.
surveyed our members around issues like this, but what's interesting is it doesn't prevent our members or a group of our members to pronounce themselves against something or for something, right? So, for instance, and you were part of this, we came up with a platform around the pandemic, right before Biden became president, called Southern Communities for a Green New Deal. And we created and we did this work, all of us together. We came up with a policy platform that wasn't written by you, it wasn't written by me, but it was written with input from over 100 people within and outside of our network. And what's case in point, when it came down to get signatories, which we got, I believe it was over 170 signatory organizations that included nonprofits, included faith-based institutions and churches, and included small businesses. Many in our membership did not sign on because
Mm-hmm.
some, for example, were for carbon pricing, right? They were in agreement with most of the things that we were calling out as, or that the platform was calling out as false solutions, but they were in agreement. So, and that was fine. As a member, you
Mm-hmm.
have the option to sign on or not. So if we send a sign on letter to our network, again, I'm not going to speak on behalf of SEN. It has to be an exceptional situation for us to speak, and say on behalf of the SEN network. I think, for example, the outcry against the George Floyd murder back in 2020
Mm-hmm.
was one instance where
Right.
I actually put a statement out on behalf of the entire network, and there was absolutely no disagreement. You feel me?
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I want people to know the difference between a network and U.S. Climate Action Network is a similar in some regards the mother organization for SEN, but I want people to understand that people can still work together, It's like for it's no surprise to you. No, I don't support carbon capture and sequestration. One, because it's still experimental. It hasn't been done long enough for us to know the long-term impacts. And second, where you gonna put the carbon capture mechanism. You're going to put them in the communities where carbon is emitted, which means that you'll be putting them in black and brown and low income white communities where they're situated. And we don't know what the long term impacts are. But like you said, we can agree to disagree on certain things, right? Also, Sen has done some things around culture. You've done some work with exposure labs and talk about the importance of media. And because, they used to have this saying out, which was so false. If you build it, they will come. And then
Mm.
someone figured out you can build it, but if no one knows you built it, no one is coming, right? So why don't you talk about some of the media and communication opportunities that Sen has and continues to have?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, just on the last point, you and I are not agreeing to disagree on carbon capture. I think I have personally your position, but again,
Mhm.
not everybody in our network does. But Film in the Field, this is Exposure Labs. We've done a few initiatives with them. They're a really nice film company. Done a lot of great work. They're the ones that came up with the Chasing Ice and Chasing Coral documentaries that you can find on Netflix. I believe
Mhm.
Chasing Coral is free, and Chasing Ice you have to pay a small fee to see it, but they're worth watching. And so the first year that we did this, I believe it was in 2021, we basically came to an agreement to give out small grants to some of our grassroots member organizations, and this is just within the Send network. And you had to be a grassroots member organization to be able to apply. And these are grants up to $10,000 to showcase their films in different communities. And we had several groups apply, get this funding, and then with that funding, they were able to showcase Chasing Ice and Chasing Coral. And we had some faith communities showcase them. So we got a very, very strong reach in different communities, in different places where people, again, had no idea. And going back to the educational element, they had no idea what was happening. This is an educational tool, and we leveraged it, and we leveraged our membership to support that with very small grants. And then the second iteration of that has been an RFP round, but for Send members to actually create their own documentaries. So we have documentaries, for example, a group in South Florida called Aham Education is doing a documentary on healing people, heal the planet, and the intersection between mental health, mindfulness, and climate change mitigation and advocacy here in South Florida, where I live. Another group is focused, led by our board treasurer and North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, about talking about U.S. fair shares, right? An initiative that is calling for the U.S. being the largest emitter, along with countries like Japan and countries in Western Europe and China, to pay their fair share when it comes to the climate emissions that we talked about earlier that come from fossil fuels, right? Industrialized countries in the north are should bear the brunt of this crisis, and the brunt responsibility for this crisis. So that's another example of a film that is being created, and we actually raised a little bit more money to help these documentaries kind of get over the top. And hopefully later this year, in our virtual convening in November, we'll be able to showcase some of them. And if not, definitely you'll see it next year when we have a convening that it's going to happen in Puerto Rico. So thank you for asking that.
Mhm.
And basically the genesis for this initiative is the fact that, we understand that storytelling is very important. As they say, Rev, facts tell, but stories sell. So,
Mhm.
stories move people, films move people. And I think, this is something that has a tremendous amount of potential for us to, again, scale it and build upon it.
I didn't understand. I didn't realize you were having a convening in Puerto Rico. And earlier this year, we visited there. We were part of a group called the Shared Insight Fund, and we were just SEN has member organizations in Puerto Rico, and we were able to fund two organizations there, and
Wow.
actually got to visit a research group outside of San Juan. And I was, you brought that up. I was getting ready to ask you about coral reefs because you live in Southern Florida. This group is actually working on restoring coral reefs and growing sea urchins. I got to hold one in my hand. They're cool. And and during this
Wow.
current, um, heat wave, this extreme heat, there was a lot of stories on the news, CNN, everywhere about the threat to coral reefs and how heat bleaches them and kills them. And people don't realize if we lose our coral reefs, there's not going to be enough fish and et cetera to help feed the 8 billion people on this planet. And so, is that something you're going to be looking at, or is that something that Sen has been looking at in terms of, and definitely uh, we would encourage people to go to YouTube, right, and watch Chasing Coral. Mhm. Yeah, so
Yeah,
is that something Sen is looking at or is addressing because it's really hit Florida hard. Mhm.
it has hit Florida hard, and we don't have a lot of members that work on that particular issue.
Mhm.
So we need to recruit members that work in that issue and collaborate, even if they don't become members. Coral bleaching is another very daunting challenge, but there are ways to restore them, right? And the
Right.
biodiversity in those coral reefs are, forget the fact that we need it for food or whatever. I mean, just the sheer beauty of those coral reefs and the abundance of life in them, it just makes you fall in love. You know,
Mhm.
I Chasing Coral is one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, and it moved me. And what was interesting is many people who showed in the documentary watching that film were really moved. And
Mhm.
case in point again, you know, stories sell, right? A lot of you don't know what you don't know, and I think so doing that work is incredibly important. It needs to be resourced and funded more. And let's talk offline, Rev, about Puerto Rico in general and this particular
Mhm.
issue in particular, because there's definitely groups in South Florida we can talk to, definitely groups in Puerto Rico and other parts that we can work with as well. So yeah, thank you for that
Oh,
question.
oh yeah, absolutely. I'll be glad to connect you with two groups in Puerto Rico that we funded, and we went to visit in April. But that's one of the things when we talk about climate and energy. People don't understand the intersectionality that how how stuff like extreme heat actually endangers our food supply. How torrential rains can cause farmers to lose their crops. It's you mentioned several times education. People don't see the connection. They think, oh, okay, we had a bunch of wildfires, but they don't understand that that has an impact on everything that's in that
Mhm.
forest. And the impact is not limited just to what happened in the forest, but also how that impacts us as human beings. And
That's
and
right.
there's a need to educate people more about that. And there's so many examples. I remember that I used to see bats. They used to fly around the street lamp every summer, and they,
Hmm.
the moths and
Yeah.
insects insects were attracted to the light, and bat would just fly around, just feeding itself. I haven't seen bats do that in a couple of summers. But then I also don't see the number of moths and gnats
Mm,
that they're probably gone because whatever has reduced the number of insects, the bats have nothing to feed on. And what we don't realize as human beings is that we may not like gnats and insects, but they serve a purpose, right?
absolutely.
Mhm.
They all serve
So,
a purpose. Everything
mhm.
serves a purpose.
Yes, yes. So yeah, so that's so what do you see, new directions? What are some of the things that you want to see the network do in new directions? I know that you expanded the network because at one time it did not include Puerto Rico, um, and I don't
Hmm.
know if the U.S. Virgin Islands, but and also Texas. So you're still looking at further expansion, picking up new projects, working on, like we would say, bringing in groups that are addressing issues that member organizations aren't addressing now. What does what
Hmm.
does Sen look like in 2024? That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, excellent question. Well, and let me frame it by saying, speaking of what you were just talking about, we're facing, even if you look at this selfishly, we're facing an existential crisis here,
Hmm.
and this is a reality of what's happening. Species dying off the way they are. Everything serves a purpose. We're all God's creatures, right? And everything serves a purpose. And we can't be so arrogant to think that pick favorites and no. The bats. I also have heard about bats, and I remember in college I went to school in Pensacola, and it was a very shaded kind of campus. A lot of trees, and bats would
Hmm.
fly around at night, and we would be freaked out by it and then laugh about it. But you know that doesn't happen anymore. So that's not good. But we are facing an existential crisis, and I think the more people understand this, and I believe that people are coming around. I've seen a significant shift even within the media, some media, anyways, about this
Hmm.
issue. And it's and to go into your question, it's how you talk to different people, right, across the ideological spectrum about this, to where they hear you, right? So in some parts of the South, if you say climate change, immediately, you're a liberal and they don't want to talk to you.
Hmm.
But if you say the changing climate, right, or if you have a messenger that this person identifies with, telling them the same thing you would tell them, then all of a sudden it resonates because they see that something is happening. Especially farmers, right? I mean, they know better than most that something the
Hmm.
hell is going on, right? So where Sen is headed is, let me start with your membership question. We are not fully on established in Puerto Rico yet. I actually took a few trips to the island earlier this year, around water resiliency issues, and actually met with water cooperatives because I'm a native Spanish speaker. I was asked to present to these cooperatives on water resiliency and so on, and just had a wonderful time doing it, and also met some amazing people, and not just in San Juan, but this is in Adjuntas, this is in different communities up in the mountains. Um, so we're kind of building inroads there, but we're trying to do it smartly, and we're trying to do it in a way where we're not going to Puerto Rico to tell Puerto Ricans what they need to do. We're going
Hmm.
over there to listen and to see what added value can we bring. And when I say we, I'm talking about our network and the experience of multiple organizations in the southeast, to Puerto Rico, okay, and vice versa, right? So that's the spirit of that. And then if we bring in Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, of course, is part of that as well. And I have had some conversations with folks about the U.S. Virgin Islands, which is much smaller than Puerto Rico, but cannot be forgotten and should not be forgotten either. So we're looking at both of those. Texas, we have one Sen member from Texas, Texas Impact. But for the time being, I think our priority is Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and strengthening our membership base in different states in the southeast, where we already have a presence, but it's not, it could be stronger, if you will, right?
Mhm.
And then, but again, we're open. We're not actively, if you will, trying to get new members every month. We don't say, I don't tell my team, hey, let's get 10 new members every month. It's not about that. It's it's not sales, right? So
It's
so the
quality,
organization wants
not quantity. Mhm.
it's quality. And in 2019, we started with 28. We got smaller before we got bigger. So we became a formal network. 28 organizations signed up, paid their yearly dues, which are staggered, which are not staggered, but how do you say this? Where based on your budget is how much you pay. So it's not everybody pays the same. And if you're a small organization with a budget less than 150,000, it's $50 a year, and then we provide stipend support. We provide actually financial support to a lot of these groups because we're in a position to do it because they need it, right? And it enhances the work. So where we're going is we're looking. One important piece of this is big funding. Big funding needs to get to the community, and you and I have had this conversation, and I believe that we are completely in agreement and on the same page in principle here. We need funding. We need money going down to the community level. We need
Mhm.
communities to be part of the design of whatever fixes are going to be happening in that community. And I am particularly interested, maybe more than anything else, in transforming communities. Okay, what does it look like to transform a community, right? Uh, clean. Let's start with the buses, right? The school buses. It should be clean energy buses, right?
Right.
The, solar panels. Solar panels should be a luxury for the upper middle class, right? But it should be available for everybody. You feel me?
Mhm.
Community gardens, if you will. We don't need to have our poor neighborhoods become food deserts. Okay. Lack of tree canopy in certain areas and a lot of tree canopy in other areas. We need to walkable cities. Transportation is a humongous issue in the southeast. Definitely in Florida, where I live, you can't go anywhere unless you have a car. Okay, but you
Mhm.
go up north and you go to different countries in the world, including Argentina. You have subway systems, you have public transportation, you have walkable cities, right? You feel me? So there's a lot that can be done at the community level, and there's funding out there to do it. So we've actually partnered up with some different organizations, submitted some grants, hopefully or proposals, hopefully get some funding from IRA and elsewhere to do that work. So
Mhm.
this is pending, but that's one major goal of ours is to really start having a larger impact. On the
Mhm.
one hand, and we have started with actually we made a decision late around this time last year that we were going to go ahead and if we don't get the funding from a foundation or from what have you, we were going to dedicate some of our general operations funding to our Send for Southern Communities tour.
Mhm.
And we launched this tour in 4 different states in the southeast. Hopefully next year we will go to the next 3. So the 4 were Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, and Georgia. And we had an RFP late last year. We had a lot of interest, and we selected a small number of projects that we're supporting. I'll give you a couple of examples in a minute, but basically the idea was and continues to be for us to go to these communities and spotlight good initiatives that are happening, projects that are obviously enhancing the community, that are led by the community, and are replicable and hopefully even scalable, right? What this initiative is not about is about branding for Sen. Okay, this is
Mhm.
really to shine the spotlight, and that's a very important difference. And I just want to be very clear, and this might upset some people. I don't care. This is not a dog and pony show. Okay, this
Uh-huh.
isn't. In fact, I haven't attended one of these. I've had my team go. The only one that I'm going to go to is going to be in Tampa, St. Petersburg, and they asked me to speak, and I'm telling them, I'm like, I'll speak for 2 minutes, but I cannot be the spotlight of this event. I cannot be the spotlight of this initiative. You have to be the spotlight. All right, we're here to
Mhm.
shine the spotlight on you. So can I give you rather just a couple of examples?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Mhm.
All right, real quick. Haven Community Nursery in Alabama. Okay, project aims to plant 10 mini food forests in 2023. and build the infrastructure needed for dozens more plantings in 2024. These food forests will decrease dangerous heat and flooding while increasing community preparedness. So we provided a $10,000 grant, again from our own funding for supplies for this project, and we're going there and we're filming it.
Mhm.
Another one is going to be in St. Petersburg, Florida. The project will provide targeted and intensive trauma-informed resiliency and pro-resiliency training to various entities who are engaged in humanitarian and disaster relief and response efforts in order to empower them to meet their own mental health and emotional resiliency needs, as well as the needs of those they serve. So that's the one with a group called the Florida Food Policy Council, a very small grassroots organization that actually just got came into some bigger funding,
Mhm.
and we will support co-facilitating the trainings and providing logistics support prior to and during the event. So that's just a couple of examples. I can give you another one if you like.
Yep.
If you don't stop me, I'll keep talking. Huh? So um, another one. Let me find one in Mississippi actually, which we're going to go to next. This is a MRC Mutual Aid Network. The project couples material support and rapid response and recovery work with political education and organizing to connect climate issues, economic issues, and racial issues. MRC Mutual Aid Network currently has 2 community gardens and food distribution networks in Mississippi and a rapid response team. So our support funding goes towards replenishing disaster response supplies. Our staff will tend to the community gardens, distribute fresh food to frontline communities, and assist in disaster cleanup from flooding, tornadoes, and the hurricanes that have hit the state. We had a recent one that we did in New Brunswick, Georgia, around hurricane preparedness. And I'll tell you just a quick story. Abigail Franks, who is one of our program managers, was a staff person there, as was Sofia Pesaño. So Sofia, she's our operations and communications manager, and Abigail's a programs manager. They went together. One's from Mississippi, from Alabama, sorry. Abigail's from Alabama, Sofia's from South Carolina, right? They went on an event. So this event took place on a Saturday, and we all understand how hot it is, right? This is a Saturday afternoon. The great majority of the people out there were elderly people, and they were
Mhm.
very engaged, very plugged in, really cool stuff. Huh? And I quote, one of the ladies went up to Abigail, and she was just like, we're so happy you're here. We're thrilled that you're here. We thought that nobody cared about us, and here you are coming from all the way from Alabama, and your friends from South Carolina, just to support us. And she was just so thrilled, right? And that just it broke my heart. It was just it almost brought me to tears because a lot of these people, have been forgotten, right? A lot of these people, aren't cared
Mhm.
for, right? And these communities, and even on an emotional level, to reach somebody like that's worth $1 million. You understand? So, so that's just a few examples of things that we're supporting. Some of these projects are scalable, some of them could be replicable, right? But they all really just are mobilizing communities to take action
Mhm.
and really take control of their lives in the communities.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's amazing. And you've heard me say for years that it's all about community-led solutions. The cavalry may not be coming, but the cavalry is most definitely us. We have to start saving our own communities and dealing with the problems in the community. So the other thing, so we talked a lot about, the Southeast, but Sen is also involved, with some of your member organizations on national issues, because the issues in the South are national issues also, but also internationally. And so, when you and I were in Bonn, Germany, and we had a conversation about what the United Nations is doing and some of the similarities, because it's not just the southeastern portion of the United States, but throughout the global South, we're facing some of the same climate impacts, the same pollution, the same problems. And so, I know you have a position in terms of loss and damages, And also, though they don't want to use the term climate refugees, a lot of the immigration problems that we're facing are due to what's happening with the weather, with the climate. So I was hoping you might share some of what Sen is looking at, on the global level.
Yeah, so we've been engaged through US CAN, primarily in the international work. As I mentioned earlier, I have an international background. I've also participated in and been worked in a secretariat that observed or provided support to international negotiations, intergovernmental negotiations, multilateral negotiations. And let me tell you, those are slow moving and complicated. Okay, so what we witnessed in Bonn, and what I liked about Bonn, that's a little different from the Council of the Parties or COP, is Bonn is a lot smaller, so you actually, as civil society, have access to a lot of the negotiations, right? And I was able to comfortably sit there with my computer and listen. And what I heard was a lot of the same. And I'm not putting down any government officials or negotiators or any of that. Many are good people and are doing the best they can. And also many are responding to policies that come from higher ups, okay, or positions that come from higher ups. But let me tell you, the sense of urgency, I saw it from some of the moderators or the chairs of the working groups. I didn't see it from a lot of the negotiators, but we're running out of time. The UN Secretary General is screaming at countries. Like, I'm very proud of him. I love hearing him. Like, I hope they're listening to him. But basically, he's saying, what did he say? He said that this is not a climate, oh God, global warming. This is the global boiling now, right? So, so our position right now as a network, and you're absolutely right when you tie in the global South and the U.S. South, and let me just put a caveat that clearly, you have different levels of development, right, in different countries. You have LCDs, countries that are very, very poor, right, to middle income countries. There's also variance in size. There's also variance in per capita wealth and what have you, right? But what is similar is that the global South, if you will, bears the brunt of climate change, right? Not the responsibility mostly, but the brunt of it. And there's so much inequity, right, within a lot of these countries and from the global North to the global South. And even if you look at, financing, right, and these multilateral institutions that provide loans, and then these impossible interest rates that countries, are dying to pay off, right, so they can get more loan funding, right? And I'm seeing that happen right now in Argentina, for example. So there's that level, but then also, in the U.S., in the South, the region that's relegated as the least, if you will, which it isn't, right? But the worst climate impacts are happening here. That doesn't mean they're not happening elsewhere, but they're happening here, right? And then the conversation, nobody in the United States knows what the heck loss and damage is, right? But Hurricane Ian hitting the west coast of Florida last year was a loss and damage event. I had a reporter from BBC News call me, ask me, he's like, are they speaking about this loss and damage event near Fort Myers, Florida? I'm like, no, they're not. They don't. That's not a frame here. What happened in Hawaii, that's loss and damage. I mean, that's an extreme example of loss and damage, right? So, basically where you just can't adapt anymore. Basically, you have to just figure out, do we rebuild or do we move, right? And then you get climate refugees or migration, people leaving because they don't have a choice, right?
Right.
So, our posture right now is to learn. Our posture right now is to link these issues to our region in the southeastern U.S., which we serve a network here in the southeast, to educate our members and those of our members, and there are several who are interested in engaging internationally. We need them because, and you and I have talked about this, Rev, but our voice needs to be at the table, right? When U.S. sends a delegation, the U.S. we just can't hear from California or New York or certain states or certain regions, but the South needs to also speak because our reality here is different from other parts of the country. So that's a lot. But yeah, so the question, the final, I mean, the short answer to your question is it's pending, right? Pending
Mm,
review. We're doing our homework. We're engaging. We have to be mindful of how much things cost. But we definitely are working towards being a player in the international movement, if you will, and connecting with different parts of the global south. You know, Latin America, Africa. What's the sequence? What's the order? That's to be determined. We're in that process right now.
mm, absolutely, and because in the southern portion of the United States, and this is the education piece once again, because when we look at the news here in the United States and we see the immigration problem, and I've heard Fareed Sakari of CNN many times say our immigration system is broken. Well, why is it broken? You know, the news media would have you believe that the United States is the only country that has immigrants, you know, or refugees, or some people call them climate refugees, just, you know, massing at their borders. The same thing is happening with people leaving the Middle East and Africa and moving up into Europe. The same thing is happening with Southeast Asia, all around the world. As the planet heats up, people are living in poor countries that don't have many resources. And when the droughts hit them and when they don't have enough sustainable water, just imagine if it's how hot it is here. Imagine further south of us, it's even hotter. And imagine that many of these poor countries, they don't have fans, they don't have air conditioning. And if on average in the United States, 750 people on average die of heat related causes, and this year will be over the, I'm sure, over the 7,000 average of people who have to go into hospitals because of heat related issues. So if we're looking at what's happening here, and we look at what's happening with our southern border and the same thing that's happening elsewhere, people need to realize that that, as you said, this is an existential problem. That's what the scientists say, right, Alex? This is about existing. Are we going to deal with climate change and try to lessen this period? Or else we're going to see many more people dying, unfortunately, as in what has happened, you know, recently in Hawaii. So I
Yeah.
encourage you and the Sin Network to get involved on the international level, because if we in the United States and other countries can't make those connections, um,
Mm.
people are going to believe, well, what they're going through in Pakistan, where, you know, a third of the country was flooded and they lost 6,000 people. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
think these are isolated incidents and they're not going to see that there's a connection. Don't you agree? And now you have me preaching. but uh,
No, well,
but
preach.
but I think it's really important that if we're going to find the connections and the similarities, you know, not only here, but in the global south, most of the polluting facilities are in the south, the southern
Mm-hmm.
US and the global south. Most of the poverty in the south, in the US and throughout the
Mm-hmm.
global south. So we have to know, we have to show people that this is not, when there's a hurricane in Florida, it's not just about Florida. When there's wildfires in California, it's not just California or Canada, or you see what I'm saying? Um,
Oh yeah.
and that's why we need networks. That's why we need organizations and people working together. And I'm saying what you already know and do every day. Um, So we're getting to the point where we're running out of time. Every time we talk, we cover
It's
so
fun,
many
man.
points. Yeah, it's fun, but we can go on and on, can't we? So so
We can. I can't believe an hour went by already. That's pretty wow.
yeah.
Um,
So, but tell people how they can get in touch with Sen. Repeat again. Well, not repeat again, but tell them what the qualifications are for. First, tell them what the qualifications are of joining the network, because there may be some people out there listening that would like to join the network, and then tell them how they
sure.
can get in touch with you and Sen.
Absolutely. So our website is sen, SCEN US.org. So sen-us.org. You can go. There's a page in our website that says become a member, and it shows you the benefits and levels. The homepage has our basically our mission, our vision, and our values. One, you have to be involved somehow, some way in the business of climate. Okay, whether it's environmental justice, whatever your issue is, wind energy, whatever your issue is, but you have to be involved. A percentage of your organization's work needs to be involved in environmental climate work, and climate justice work. Okay. Also, we ask you to adhere to our values. Our values are justice, equity, actually integrity. Fun is one of our values. Community is one of our values. We included fun. I always say this because even though this is very heavy work, we as a network, and you all have been there, we always find a way to have fun together. Sometimes we
Mhm.
agree to disagree on different things, but we're all human. We're all doing what we believe is the best thing to do to help our planet, our communities. So you have to agree with our values, be a part of our values, right? And I would encourage you to look at some of our members. We have a listing of our members. In fact, if you click on them, then you go directly to the website, so get to know us a little bit. We also have, information about our work and the different things that we're doing. There's different things that I didn't even mention in this conversation that we're doing that's very, very strong and very, very important for our communities. So you can join. You can contact me by my email, Alex at sen-us.org. So Alex at sen-us.org. That's my personal email. I'll connect you with our membership coordinator. His name is Yuri, and he and I will follow up with you and have a conversation.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alex Easdale, Executive Director of the Southeast Climate and Energy Network. And if you're interested in doing work in your community and joining SEN, you have the connection now. And if you're interested in getting in touch with me, Reverend Leo Whitbury, you can reach me at info@newalphacdc.com. You can go to our website, www.newalphacdc.com, or if you want to reach me via telephone, please feel free to call me at the church where I'm privileged to pastor, and that's Kingdom Living Temple, telephone number 843-799-0740. And so thank you once again, Alex Easdale, for coming and sharing
Hmm.
so much information and knowledge with our audience. And if you want to know the things that you need to know and the places where you need to go, tune in again next week to the Leo and Larry Show. God bless you and take care.
All right. Thank you. Thank
You're
you, Rev.
welcome. Thank you.